𝗡𝗠𝗜 is one of my favorite video characters ever. That's in part because the way he's treated in his game, Detroit Become Human, reminds me of the way I was treated as an autistic person during my own experience and my own life. However, recently an idea has sparked into my mind to confirm this. The way Connor was treated and used in Detroit Become Human reminded me a lot of the treatment of Woo Young-woo in the K-drama Extraordinary Attorney Woo. Now I know Connor is not canonically stated as on the autistic spectrum, not that I know of at least, but his struggle with social interactions, analyzing of human behavior in order to reproduce it, tendency to take things literally, and of course psychorigidity makes his lived experience very similar to the ones of autistic people, and literally steaming in the first scene of the game. So as for Young-woo, the whole K-drama is basically about her navigating life while being on the autistic spectrum. Love, work, friendship, family, etc. I'm aware her and Connor are very much opposites in a lot of aspects, especially personality-wise. A very bubbly yet shy woman versus a calculating yet silly man. Identity-wise, a South Korean woman versus a white American man, android. And media-wise, a K-drama versus a video game. But it does show that no matter who you are, if the system finds a way to exploit something out of you, it will without a second thought. In today's video, the thing in question will be psychorigidity and how it is exploited by the environments of Connor and Woo Young-woo. Psychorigidity is defined as the strict observance for one's personal principles and rules, with the struggle to take into account another point of view. I believe Connor and Young-woo are two very explicit examples of psychorigidity because their rules they live by are very much explicit in the media they are part of. First, Connor, whose set of rules is literally programmed into him. He was built to investigate the crimes committed by deviants, arrest them, and find a way to stop others from deviating too. I know what you're thinking about if you remember the end of his route. I'll touch on that later. He was designed this way. His principles are written inside of him, and he thoroughly lives by them. Young-woo, on the other hand, doesn't have them literally inscripted inside of her, but the rules she follows are still precisely written down, the laws. She's a lawyer, she knows the penal code by heart, and her whole job is to make sure it is applied to its fullest. Since both those examples are so explicit, it is also very obvious who profits from them: the state. From Connor, by the police, by repressing the androids that don't fit the slave mold. From Young-woo, by the court, by making sure the dissidents are punished and the privileged manage to slip through the cracks. Indeed, people like them, never backing away from their principles, are the perfect tools to apply your policies. That's often to their detriment, absorbing their energy, getting them to do dirty work, and of course, without giving them any credit nor respect. Now that I explained my point vaguely, let me dive deeper into each of these two characters' story. The state needs Connor. He was literally ordered to be built by the biggest tech company of the USA in order to investigate the murders committed by deviants and prevent them from happening. And he is obviously despised because he is himself an android. Objects mean to obey to humans and make their lives easier, yet stealing their jobs, invading their spaces, etc. Not only Connor is in an ambivalent and paradoxical situation because of his only identity, but he's also placed in a contradictory position at the police station. On one hand, he's expected to do everything in order to stop the deviants, using all the tools he was constructed with, blue blood recognition vision, ability to enter other androids' minds, etc. On the other hand, he is prevented from doing so by the cops around him, who refuse to let him take the spotlight and replace them, or even by the very own government that gave him the task when the case is to be transferred to the FBI. Doesn't make sense for Connor. His rules are set in stone. Find the deviants responsible for the murders of civilians, discover the cause of deviance, stop it. Why would the people he works for or with do spoke in his will? In his eyes, it's impossible to understand. Yet for the cops, the obvious thing and they expect Connor to jump between perspectives as smoothly as them and to guess how he is supposed to act at every instant, even though it goes against his rules. But he can't do that. He can grasp the social cues, the nuances of the environment, the hints and unsaid things that all the people around him seem to instinctively share, not clear to him. When he's supposed to go all the way, when he's supposed to hold back, who he's supposed to obey, and when. This creates a profound dissonance within him. If he disobeys, he'll grow into a deviant, but at the same time, he's sometimes looked down upon and even criticized for following too strictly his rules. He's an android, an inspector at that, and his rules make a huge part of his personal identity. Breaking a rule means betraying himself. That dilemma is even further accentuated by the presence of Hank alongside him. Connor is very explicitly asked to obey Hank, both as a human that he has to serve and a superior, since he's lieutenant. As a representative of the state and of justice, Hank is the personification of his mission, or at least he's supposed to be. Throughout the case, the lieutenant drifts more and more away from the opinion of the police and the general population, developing empathy towards the androids and growing understanding for the reasons of deviance. This only adds contradictions for Connor, as the person he's supposed to assist in stopping the deviance begins to work against this goal, and vividly criticizes Connor when he uses the methods expected of him. Connor's principles are a key tool for the government, yet they are also one of the reasons he is despised by the people around him. His psychorigidity is only acknowledged when it can be exploited for the repression of his own people, but is completely ignored, if not mocked, when it is affecting his personal identity and sense of self. The state toys with his principles so hard it provokes dissonances within him and shatters his identity, causing profound distress that is very well portrayed throughout the game. It's too android for humans not to despise him, but when he's too human, he becomes suspicious and suffers from violent repression. It's better to never falter, except when he's supposed to, but when he does, he'll get punished for it. Connor's psychorigidity is praised as long as it makes him a good little soldier. The Ordinary Attorney whose episodes vary a lot in themes and topics from one episode to another. To make it easier for me to write and you to understand, I'll focus my analysis on one of the episodes from the K-drama Wildcard vs. Tactician. In this episode, Hambada, the law firm Young-woo is a part of, is hired by the ATM manufacturer 𝗡𝗏. The company accuses Gum Gang, a rival company, of copying their technology. Gum Gang, on the other hand, claims that 𝗡𝗏 is actually attempting to patent an open-source design that both companies have used. Young-woo is paired on this case with Kwon Min-woo. Her insufferable colleague sort of works as an agent for the state following my video's thesis. Min-woo is the perfect personification of society's duality towards Young-woo. He's constantly trying to sabotage her because she's too efficient, too rigid, too weird. Praying for her fall, yet on this case, he's constantly reminding her of her job, of what she has to do for their client, or of how she has to use every piece of her knowledge in order to win the case. This is especially obvious when Young-woo receives a letter from Gum Gang begging her to be a good attorney and investigate the truth instead of protecting her client without any critical thinking. Min-woo actively discourages her from doing so, arguing that her duty isn't to uncover the truth, but to defend her client at all costs. However, that isn't a part of Young-woo's principles. When she stepped inside law school, she did so to learn the rules supposedly written to ensure equity and peace between all citizens of South Korea. The truth, what's right, is what she learned for, what was taught to her, and is constantly brought up by her surroundings. But just like Connor, Young-woo struggles to understand social cues, and by that I mean the laws are made to maintain the status quo and the domination of oppressors on the oppressed, and expectations society has for her. Not supposed to do what's right, she's supposed to do what's advantageous for her client. For a moment, Young-woo will even follow what society expects from her, coaching Manager Bae on how to act in court, since he shows alarming signs of lying. Pray that as long as her impressive knowledge of the penal code and creativity in using it is exploited in each and every corner to ensure powerful people remain this way. Of course, she'll remain in an unadapted environment for her needs nonetheless, she'll be looked down upon and mocked by her colleagues and clients, and no one will care for her identity crisis and reconsideration of her principles. That reconsideration is especially draining for her, because two of her key roles enter into conflict because of this case: the quest for the truth and the need to defend her clients at all costs. In her psychorigidity, she's expected to be emotionally distant from her rules, simply applying them without any more reflection. That is impossible for any human, but especially for people on the autistic spectrum like her, because her principles are an enormous part of her identity, and her emotions emerge from who she believes she is and how she perceives the world. When she's asked to cast aside her principles, when two of her personal roots fight against one another, it has the effect of a hurricane on her identity. She starts believing that she's been living her life wrong, that she's betraying herself, that she's a deception, etc. In the end, Jung-woo's psychorigidity is only praised when it is separated from the moral values attached to it, which it can't, and is distorted in every way possible in order to maintain the privileges of the powerful. However, in bitter irony, her rules are mocked and considered childlike, even though society itself implanted them in her, when they are no longer an advantage to the state, but are in favor of the greater good. She's only considered useful when she acts as a walking penal code, not a human being with her own emotions and opinions. Luckily, Connor and Jung-woo don't remain in this ambivalent position between the state and their values forever. First, because that is too emotionally draining to stay on the long run, and second, because they refuse for their identity to be weaponized against their community or other oppressed communities by the state. Both of them go through a shift in their principles. Jung-woo ends up letting go of the superiority of the client. In her identity, searching to uncover the truth and reach the right outcome is more important and fundamental than protecting the person that can afford her services. She sides with Gum-gang, even though a little bit late, since even if the injunction is lifted after the testimony was proven false, it has remained long enough for the company to go bankrupt. But the most obvious sign of her shifting principles is at the end of the episode, when she takes down the sunflower painting that was previously gifted to her, signifying wealth to come, and instead pins up her wall the letter Gum-gang sent her. From now on, she'll always be reminded of why she became a lawyer. Let the truth win. Human's shift only occurs when you do his deviant route, obviously. If, at the beginning of the game, he doesn't hesitate to go all the way for the state's will, by denouncing the android hiding in the attic without the player's choice, for example, by progressively being exposed to society's confusing ambivalence and hence moral callouts, he stops working with the police and joins the deviants, finding out the address of their hideout and giving it to the cops. It took a long way. Connor's strict observance for justice gradually widens until the deviants become a part of his spectrum, and his own identity finally finds a place in his vision of the world. I want to make something very clear though. Neither Connor nor Jung-woo stop being psychorigid. My thesis is not to say that it's when they stop being so rigid and serious, they become happier and better people, even though cognitive flexibility can always be a useful day-to-day life tool. What I want to emphasize is that when they both free their values from society's expectations and refuse to let them be a mean of oppression, they are able to retrieve control over their self and let their identity bloom outside of the state's authority. They never stop strictly following their principles. They stop letting society dictate what is right or wrong, and let their core values shift until they fit what kind of person they are and wish to be, even if it isn't socially accepted. Others will mock them either way, might as well follow principles that lead to personal and collective freedom. Now for my last point on Connor, I will obviously address the elephant in the room. Him becoming a deviant was actually planned all along by Cyberlife. You could argue my argument falls flat, since we might consider Connor never truly gains autonomy over his principles, but simply followed what has always been asked of him. And yeah, I guess you could, but I'd rather see this from another light. Connor becoming a deviant being planned all along is just another example of society trying to regain control over his autonomy. It notices Connor slipping away, following values that are no longer advantageous, and does everything in order to exploit whatever they can out of him, with vicious stratagems. Activating the protocol to kill Marcus is a light, desperate attempt to keep Connor under their grasp before he becomes entirely independent from them. And even if you don't interpret this segment this way, the other cops working with Connor probably don't know about the plan and still work as agents of the state nonetheless. So, my point is still to put them. That will be all for today. I know it might seem a bit random of a video, but I made a connection between them a couple ago and it haunted me day and night. If you like my analysis, you can always drop a like, a comment or subscribe. And until then, have a good day. I'll see you in the next video.